And good morning, Common Sense America. I'm Eden Hill. Welcome. It's Tuesday. It's May the 16th. We are rocking and rolling this May. And we are more than halfway done. This May has been crazy, but it's been a good May. And I'm so glad to have you here, both Eastern North Carolina, New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I tell you what, we got some great audiences joining us this morning. Thank you to each and every one of you in the North, in the South, and the Midwest, and on the West Coast for supporting Common Sense America. If you have not done so yet, hop over to Common Sense America YouTube channel, subscribe. Don't miss a thing. We have so many phenomenal guests coming to you to talk about God, to talk about our country, to talk about our family, and the kitchen table discussions that drives this show. And you know what gets me up every morning is the fact that we are here to serve this great nation. We, the people of the United States, have the power within our voices to fight for this great country, to fight for the young minds, to fight for the next generation, to protect this great homeland we call America, that we call our home. So I tell you what, we have two powerful guests here at Common Sense America. This morning, we have a brand new guest. We're going to be talking about education. You guys know how much I love to talk about education. We're going to be hammering it out with a book author I have not had yet to the show. The title of the book is called Brittle Minds. Think about that for a second. Brittle Minds. For all of those who have attended university, for all of those who attended trade schools, for all of those who decided to do a special school versus going to a university where you had to pay tens of thousands of dollars to be taught woke indoctrinations and authoritarian mentality, this interview is for you. Second half of the show, we have a returning guest, Ramona Bessinger, a dear friend of mine, teacher, an educator in the great state of Rhode Island. She was put in teacher jail for fighting back the woke indoctrination that she was being forced to teach her students. She's been on the front lines fighting for your kids. Yeah, she may be in the state of Rhode Island, but she's fighting. She's leading the way for many educators around this nation who are saying, what do I do now? Do I remain teaching? Do I stay in the systems? Do I go against the grain? Do I fight? I see it here right in Eastern North Carolina. I spoke about it the other day with an educator from Loudoun County. Loudoun County is all over the news. You guys know it. So many different things are popping up in our nation's backyard. And the kitchen table discussions, what are we talking about? Are we talking to our phones? Or are we talking to an individual? Are we talking to our spouses? Are we talking to our kids? Are we talking to those in our family who are attending university? Are we engaging? Are we engaging in these conversations? Or are we just bypassing them because we're afraid to stir the pot? Well, have no fear. Common Sense America is here, and we are stirring the pot. Yes. I may not have won my elected role I wanted to win for State House, but I tell you what, I've been able to accomplish more than the person that got elected. You know why? Speaking truth. I'm not going with the crowd. I'm not jumping off the bridge like everybody else does. I'm fighting. I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for your kids. I'm fighting for our military families who give up so much for your freedom. Yeah, we're in Military Appreciation Month as well. We've had a series of veteran service organizations, military spouses, veteran spouses on this show. And I tell you what, they're the best of the best. Still are. Even if we have a Biden in office or whoever's in office, they're still the best of the best. So I have the honor to introduce you to a gentleman I have not met before, only just privately talking on a couple conversations here on this chat, who's a book author of Brittle Minds, The Dark World of the Left-Wing Brainwashing in Our Universities, and honestly, the brainwashing of your kids, by Stanley K. Ridgely, PhD, Drexel University, Pennsylvania. I know Pennsylvania has some elections going on in the Commonwealth today, and I know things are being shook up there. That state needs it needs a lot. And one thing it doesn't need is Josh Shapiro. So Please welcome to Common Sense America this morning, Stanley K. Ridgely. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, good morning. I'm doing great. I'm speaking to you from my office in West Philadelphia, home of high taxes, high crime, 27% poverty rate, and 70 consecutive years of Democrat rule. What's not to like, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you're still alive. I'm glad you haven't been shot down. Oh my gosh.
Well, I do all right. I'm ex-military, so I do all right.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for your service. Go Army, right?
Yeah, go Army. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And it's a great opportunity to speak with you and your audience, fellow patriots, about one of the most pressing problems in America today, and that's the degradation or decline of higher education. And Brutal Minds, if you don't mind, I'll show you. Brutal Minds
Please.
is an expose of the people who are doing it, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, who they're doing it to on the college campuses, and what you and I and what parents and students can do to stop it right now, not in the near, not in the pie in the sky future, but right now. And so that's my message today, and I'm happy to get into as much detail as you like.
Yes. Well, I want to ask you a question with regards to why do we bother sending our kids to university? Why do we bother now? Because all I see is a president who graduated and lied about his education and who, frankly, doesn't give a rat's what about this nation. And this is a family show. Sorry, Dad. I know you're watching. I just swore in live, podcast. But long and short of it, you know what I'm saying. So why do we want to send our next generation to university when we see the people that it's producing? We see these elected officials it's producing, and they're not doing anything for this nation but turning it against those. And it's an authoritarian mentality that you talk about. I was reading some of your notes within this book, and I couldn't get enough of it. I want to pick up the full copy, but I'm sitting here saying to the high cost of education, why do we invest in that? Should we send our kids to trade schools? Should we give them other avenues? Because I see the mentality of, oh, I'm a college graduate, I know everything. Well, no, you don't. You really don't. You have to live life to experience. So talk to me about that. Is college even worth it now?
Well, I think so. And it all depends on how you approach the educational enterprise. And because a college education is still available, a great college education is still available if you know how to navigate the minefield on college campuses. And a lot of folks are not aware of what is going on the campuses. And when I refer to academic affairs, this is where I teach. Okay. And I have nothing but great respect for the vast majority of my colleagues who are incredibly smart people, chemistry and math and engineering and science and all those places. These are great people who simply want to do their research and teach and transmit. The university, generally speaking, has always been a vessel for the transmission of the best that has been thought and said, logic, reason, scientific method, progress onto the next generation. Well, there's a group of people out here on the campuses that are primarily are not in academic affairs. They're in something called student affairs. And their notion of the university is something dramatically different than what I just described to you. They see the university as a crucible for indoctrination, a crucible for social change according to the ideology that they espouse. And they are unabashed at what they do. And I use the term brainwashing, which is really the popularization of the program called thought reform, which has been in existence since the 1940s or so in a very refined and identifiable form. And so to be clear, in Brutal Minds, I say how you can go to college, the college of your choice. If you can identify the villains on the campus, the culprits on the campus, these are people who don't mean you well. These are people who mean to destabilize a student's relationship with his or her parents, to undermine the values and to replace that value system with one that is more in accord with their own value system that is propagated on the campus. So information and knowledge of our individual rights, of constitutional rights, the laws of this country that you do not forfeit when you walk onto a college campus. When you know this, you are armored, if you will, to address and avoid these types of people and get that education that you have that your parents are paying for.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. So the armor. that we send our next generation to university with. It's like, it's biblical, putting on the full armor of God. This show is very biblical. And I always say at the end of every show, be strong, be courageous, and put on that full armor of God. We need to do that. And we need to send those kids with that armor that you were talking about from a lot of different aspects. But let me ask you this, when they get there and they say, okay, I'm armed, I'm ready. I know how to address, I know how to speak to this. I am mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually ready for this. But when they get their grades back from a professor who has an authoritarian mentality and says, I'm failing you because I don't agree with you, whether it was a great written paper or not, how does that student approach that mentality and that setup? For example, here at UNC Chapel Hill, I know you're very familiar with North Carolina area. UNC Chapel.
I'm a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill, so
right. So the medical school is so focused more on the woke indoctrination than really the medicine. And so, what do you say to young doctors who are coming through, or young students who are coming through, and they're saying, "No, you fail. No, you fail because you believe in a certain way and you wrote a certain paper." What do you say to that with the armor that you're saying we need to go forth with at university?
well, I'm going to speak. I can't speak to the doctors at UNC Chapel Hill as much as I would love to, but I
Sure.
can speak to undergraduate students who, if you believe that you are being singled out, targeted for this kind of because of your political beliefs, and you have not articulated or you have articulated those beliefs in a way that is superb. There are avenues whereby you can appeal for this kind of professor. I will say, first of all, that most professors aren't going to do that sort of thing. The brainwashing I talk about occurs outside the classroom in what is called the co-curriculum. But in the classroom, and I've seen this, some students have sent me Zoom recordings of their classes. I have some practical experience with this. There are avenues of appeal, particularly to the department chairman. One of the things that we, and I speak in the royal we in academia, don't want is problems with parents and problems with publicity, the kinds of things that might actually engender reform. And so you'll find it's students who have the squeaky wheel, if you will, people who are knowledgeable, and there are a lot of great students here. Some of the smartest people that I've ever met. Some of my students, and they're great. And they are morally grounded. They have a Christian upbringing. They have a secular moral upbringing, and they're not going to put up with this stuff. And they come to me, and I give them direction of where they can go to fix that problem and to ensure that problem doesn't exist. I myself, in my classroom, I pursue the traditional idea of the university, which is the Max Weber, the Weberian model of a neutral classroom, and I try not to allow any of my political beliefs come out in the way I teach. I am the faculty advisor for Turning Point USA, which is
I was going to bring that up.
Well,
thank you.
Sure thing. The students, and I bring this up as an example, the students who inquired with me as to whether I would be willing to do that, they waited halfway through the quarter before they felt comfortable enough to approach me, because they kind of guessed I might be receptive to their ideas, because my classes don't give any inkling of my political beliefs. And that's the way it should be, I think. That I'm not being paid to propound any particular political ideology. I'm there to teach students about strategy and competitive advantage, about entrepreneurship, about technology, innovation, management, those kinds of things.
Yes.
There are a lot of professors, well, not a lot, but there's some professors, and I'm well aware of who they are, utilize their classes, perhaps in English or sociology, to propound a particular point of view that is not really part of their brief or mandate to teach in the classroom. But they feel that because their ideology tells them they must speak out against what they believe to be social injustice, they have to utilize that platform to do so.
I'm so glad you brought Turning Point USA up. I do a lot with Turning Point USA. I have brought a lot of my clients as speakers to Chapel Hill, talking about leadership, talking about character, talking about integrity, a lot of the things that we miss today. And Turning Point USA, I've just been so proud of the university students that I've had the opportunity to work with. And I was going to bring that up to you. How does, and with you being their advisor and being in the great state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How is that going for them? And obviously you can share as little as you need or as much as you want. But I know that even the Turning Point USA chapters I work with in the great state of Freedom, Florida, they run into a lot of what you are talking about in the brainwashing from other different groups that are on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how they respond. And I'm so proud of how they respond. Turning Point USA students respond. They handle it a lot better than those other social groups, communist groups, that when they're going out on the attack. So what are your thoughts to that, the chapters being in Pennsylvania, especially at Drexel and in Philadelphia?
Well, the demeanor of these folks, and these students are top notch.
Yes, they are.
First, I have one German, one Russian, one Asian, and one Hispanic on this board that I work with. And they are some of the most erudite and wonderful people. And they are trained. When I say trained, I mean they are brought up in their homes to recognize that there is a diversity of viewpoints. And they're not into proselytizing and hammering people on the head with a particular message. They're simply wanting to practice what they believe the foundations of this country, the foundational principles, the Enlightenment principles, as I mentioned, the logic, reason, scientific method, progress, the improvement of the human condition, the longer life expectancy, better quality of life, just all the things we've always taken for granted, which we probably should not have, because these other groups that you referred to, part of their ideology is the proselytization, the messianic type of behavior, where they're going to come after you, and they see something, or I think it's speak up, act up. Kind of thing. So they're always they're always protesting someone, protesting something, because their ideology tells them to do this in complete violation of what we in the university believe ought to be. This is a kind of a refuge from the outside political disputes that alienate people in our society. And in the university, you're supposed to have this civil discussion, et cetera, et cetera. And that is slowly being eroded by a particular type of person. And I give you Exhibit A is what happened at Stanford University with the DEI person, Tyrion Steinbach, did not tell the students, did not get them out of the room when they were shouting down a professor, a judge rather, a guest. Instead, she turned to the judge and tried to lecture him on why he was threatening the people who had come to his event to feel threatened.
Right.
That's not, I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. That type of person by this DEI person, this type of person who was the DEI person at this university, Stanford, exemplifies the kind of mentality that these folks have. When I say these folks, I'm referring to not to professors. Right. These are folks who are not even in the faculty. And they have come onto the campus in this bureaucracy. Stanford has as many bureaucrats almost as students. And these bureaucrats who are wannabe faculty have what they call, and this is a concept that a lot of people have never heard before. They have what is called a co-curriculum that runs alongside the curriculum. Now, you know what a curriculum is. I teach in the curriculum, et cetera. Yeah. But these folks run a co-curriculum. And they believe that, and this is run outside of the college classroom. There's workshops and caucuses, and oftentimes are required to go to these caucuses, which are called brave spaces, safe spaces, different dialogues, courageous conversations, where they are basically proselytized in the fundamentals of this ideology. You know it is critical race theory.
Yes.
It's critical pedagogy. It's neo-Marxist at root, which is why I should say there's a hammer and sickle on the front of.
Yes, I figured that. Yes,
yeah, it is the fundamentals, the basis of their ideology. Now they're not going to say this. They're not going to say, "Hey, we're all about neo-Marxism and crypto-Maoism."
No, they're not going to say that. No,
they use the term social justice education.
Social justice education was not what it stands for 10 years ago. Completely. I see it as almost evil.
Yeah.
There's a root of evil in all of this.
Well, even, I use the term brainwashing. And a lot of people, I don't want to leave that hanging to allow people to define it in their mind, because we sometimes think of it as that famous movie, The Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the flashing strobes and maybe physical abuse. No, we're talking about a psychological manipulation, behavior modification to change someone's belief system.
Mhm.
And some faculty in the psychology departments use it, some in the social justice, sociology department, social justice education in the education schools use the method. Can I describe this to you for just a quick second?
Please, please.
It's nothing that is new. It's not in dispute. It was developed by social psychologist Kurt Lewin in the 1940s, and he called it re-education. Now he wasn't an evil fellow because he developed it to somehow to rehabilitate criminals, and he is called the father of the American encounter group. And he called, as I said, he called it re-education, and it's 3 stages. It's unfreezing a student's belief system, changing it, and then refreezing it. Well, the folks who teach social justice education, and here's a volume right here that tells how to do it, Teaching Diversity and Social Justice, a source book. It actually tells you how to go about doing a brainwash in your class. They've changed the names from unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. They changed it to defending, surrendering, and transforming. And they've changed the name from re-education because it's kind of unsavory, right? They've
Yeah.
changed it to transformative education. And the communist Chinese have changed their name from re-education to something very similar. They call it education for transformation. And they are all about changing the belief system of the college student. And this is the reason, if you're looking for a reason, this is the reason why when students come home for that first Thanksgiving break and you're sitting
Right.
around the table, they seem so angry. They're so
Yeah.
rebellious. They feel like you betrayed. And here's a quote from that book that I just showed you. Here's a quote of how they changed that system. During the phase where they're trying to change the belief system, they say this: students are presented with social justice theory. The process is, quote, confusing, disorienting, frightening. Students might feel out of control without known boundaries or familiar ground, and they may experience strong emotions such as anger, resentment, and a sense of betrayal by those who were supposed to tell them the truth about the social world. They're talking about parents.
Yeah.
That is the core of what brainwashing is all about. And then at the very end, they want to give the student lots of activities to cement the new belief system. They call this doing the work. When you hear someone talking about, we have to do the work, that's someone who is practicing the 3rd stage of the brainwash. And I'll give you a quote. Here is what they're looking for. A new set of beliefs becomes home base for interpreting experience and creating meaning, end quote. This is the brainwash, and it's clear that this is what they're doing. If there's no dispute, there's no argument. I often run into my colleague, oh, they're not doing this sort of thing. Show me. Well, here it is.
Right.
Here it is. And
Yeah.
that's not the only manual. I've got several of them that are absolute, and I cite this in Brutal Minds. In
Mhm.
fact, Brutal Minds is all about the process that they use, how they do it, and I name names, who's doing it, where they're doing it, how they target students, and students who are smart and savvy and don't want to go along with this. Those students are labeled as student resistors, and they are singled out for additional training, as it were. And so this is ubiquitous on college campuses nationwide. You might say, well, how can this be? How can schools as different as Berkeley and Chicago and
Right.
UNC Chapel Hill and Florida
Right.
and Texas all have this very same program? This sounds like a conspiracy. Well, it's not a conspiracy because you can identify the mechanism. It's like, if Eden, that the government's taking money out of your paycheck, right?
Of course.
Now,
Of course.
now, if you didn't know the government was doing that, and I suggested the government was doing it, you don't know that's a conspiracy. But there's a IRS, and you know
Yes.
the mechanism.
Yes.
Well, likewise, if you understand what the mechanism whereby these people are piped onto the campuses, out of education schools from advanced degree programs called student affairs and higher education leadership, they graduate with these EDDs, very similar to Jill Biden, and they go back into the university to fill positions in the bureaucracy called student affairs. This is where they teach in that co-curriculum, not the curriculum, but the co-curriculum, where they give their fake courses with fake faculty, and some schools give fake transcripts. Rutgers University, St. John's University, they give fake transcripts about these activities. Now, when these people become student affairs bureaucrats,
Mhm.
they also join these off-campus professional organizations or clubs. This is where the ideology is preserved. They run institutes. These clubs produce books, articles, and they are steeped in this neo-Freudian Maoist ideology. Now, you're saying, well, why is that important? They're insignificant, right? Well, no. These clubs set the standards for
Mhm.
education school programs on the campuses. So you have this um, uh, three-cornered triangle. Well, there's no other kind. This triangle
Yeah.
of these off-campus clubs setting standards for education schools, which then recruit and then train these bureaucrats to go back onto the campus in jobs that are created for them, where they run the co-curriculum and are members of these organizations. So this is why
Mm.
is worsening. The situation is worsening because these people are becoming more and more numerous. They're
Mhm.
creating jobs for each other. They give each other advanced degrees by kind of a buddy system where
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
I'm going to be the advisor for your advanced degree in education, and I'll be on your committee. And then so they basically boosting each other up in a kind of incestuous buddy system. Uh,
It's very much a cult.
I think it is. I use cults. In fact, thank you for saying that because it's triggered something that you'll find in the book. Richard Delgado is a person who's associated with critical race theory,
Mhm.
for better or worse. But prior to his ascension in the critical race theory pantheon, he was a lawyer who studied cults. And he was studying how cults recruit people. And so the recruiting methods that cults use are very similar to the ones that we have in the college campus with student
Mhm.
affairs. In fact, brainwashing is practiced only by American cults and student affairs people on college campuses, and they use this technique. He gives a very this is in Brutal Minds. He gives the example of how the Unification Church, or what we call Moonies, how they
Right.
recruit people and how they
Right.
can screen out certain people who are not suited, the resistors, for the message. When a bus of bright, fresh-faced young people arrives at a Mooney camp for the weekend, they get off the bus. A behavior modification, they're very good at this. Behavior modification expert is watching them. And he sees the students or the young people who are most susceptible, bright, open-minded, looking around, oohing
Yes.
and eyeing what they see. And they move these over into one line. Those are the sheep, their terminology. Those are the sheep. Now, there are other students or other people, young people, who are streetwise, and they're looking around, cocking an eyebrow here. What is this all about? Looks kind of strange here.
Right.
Those are called goats, and they move the goats into another line. And this is all Richard Delgado speaking. And the goats get a perfunctory presentation, and they load them on the bus and send them back to town, which basically takes away all the dissenters and
Right.
leaves only the most tractable and malleable personalities for the Mooney message, which is peace and unity. On college campuses, it's called inclusion and belonging. Very similar, isn't it?
It sounds like a concentration camp setup.
Well, I'm not going to go so far as to call any college. I have no,
No, no, not the college campus, but what you just
yes,
described as
yeah,
the goat and the sheep, it sounded a lot
yeah,
like that. And, I sit there and say, as you were describing all of that, I kept thinking about how Biden likes to call me, American patriot, who is a MAGA, an
yeah,
extremist and a
yeah,
domestic terrorist. And that's how it also looks like, because if I
yeah,
don't conform to his thought and his thinking, I
yeah.
am then a bad person.
Well, exactly. It's a binary. People love to divide the everything into to a either or. Either you have oppressors and oppressed, exploiters and exploited, evil and good, heretics and believers.
Right, right,
And so,
right.
what's interesting, I find that the I use Richard Delgado, number one, because what he had to say was so good because he studied the cult, the Mooney cult, but he was also one of the founders and precursors of critical race theory later on. And
Mm,
so when you say, well, who says this? I said, well, it's your guy. Richard Delgado is saying this about sheep and goats. And again, it's in Brutal Minds, and it
mhm.
has lots of examples like this. In fact, the book is about 70% of what they say about themselves. And I'll say it right here. If there's
Yeah.
anything that's incorrect, if I've misquoted anyone, I've not provided enough context to get the say, I'm happy to correct it. I'm
Yeah.
happy to come on, say your show and correct it. I'm happy to put it in the next edition and recognize my errors. But I'm very confident that they're not going to do that. In
Mm.
fact, I think they're going to ignore it as long as they possibly can, because it's not me saying this about them. is providing you with the information carefully distilled
Yeah.
of what they say about themselves.
Yes, yes. Have you heard, and you may not know the answer to this, but I have attended Liberty for my Stratcoms degree and have looked at doing other degrees there. And I've noticed indoctrination in some of the general education classes that they,
Yeah.
presented to us. And so my question to you is, do you think Christian universities are welcoming this agenda as well, or do you think Regent? Do you think Regent is a little bit more leery and saying no, this is not what we are going to do here? I have you heard? Do you know, or is that any from the Christian standpoint of universities to Drexel and at UNC Chapel Hill and Ivy League? Have you heard of anything going on in those campuses compared to?
Well, the average person, anyone who's interested in what's going on, can go to a website and you can find out really for yourself whether it's happening. You just have to know what to look for. I was at a conference this past weekend, and a lady, I'll call her Mrs. Ramos, she said, you know what? I took your book. I saw her the next day, and she showed me the first 2 chapters. It was filled with notes. She said, I went online and I looked for some of the things that you were talking about, some of the red flags and the keywords. And she goes, my gosh, it's everywhere. I just didn't know where to look, and I didn't know what to look for. And now that I see it, I can see the code words they use, I can see the euphemisms they use, and I can see the influence that they have. Now, to your question, does that impact Christian universities or other universities with particular Liberty and that sort of thing, and Patrick Henry and Hillsdale?
Yeah.
The answer is going to be a kind of a cautious yes.
Yeah.
A cautious yes. And here's why. Because these folks are not announcing themselves when they come onto the campus. They use terminology like this. These folks who are interested in or do higher education leadership, they don't talk about transforming or changing the belief systems of people that they work with. They talk about enhancing student learning. They talk about development, enhancing student development. And they talk about growth and gains and change and opportunity, but they never talk about the content of what they're providing for. So I welcome to our campus and take control of the student development and student change, student learning. And then when they get on, then they begin to impose this type of ideology. And I'll tell you what the ideology really consists of in a moment. But so the answer to your question is yes, this is how they do it. Because every university has a student affairs department.
Right.
Then we tend to think of this as being the province of ultimate Frisbee games and orientation.
Yeah.
You want to make sure the sound system works and keep the pizza hot. That's what your job is.
Exactly.
Students are happy, healthy, housed, and fed. Well, that's our tradition. And they love that because, they think that I have my master's degree in higher education. I want to use it so badly. And the co-curriculum is how I can get access to students and train them up and undermine this relationship they have with their parents and their friends. So that's what we have to look at. And I think that Regent and any of these other colleges, Franciscan University of Steubenville and College of the Ozarks, schools that really don't want to welcome this kind of thing, really have to look hard. I'm a former military intelligence officer, and by nature, trained, of course, you look 1, 2, 3, 4 layers beneath the surface to find out what's really going on.
Yes.
And what I do in Brutal Minds is to provide a carefully structured schema of what is actually happening. This is what happens on in higher education, regardless of where you are. You've got academic affairs and student affairs. These guys over in student affairs have gotten the pass for many, many years. It's time to stop that, focus on them. And whenever these universities are bringing people onto the campuses, make sure that they're not someone who's come out of an ideologically driven education school that wants to impose which is crypto Maoist ideology. Now, I use that term because, that's Cold War rhetoric, crypto Maoist. What does that mean? Well, education schools are really abysmal in America, okay? And that's for a very particular reason, and that is their complete subservience to an ideology. They were colonized by neo-Marxism a long time ago. 2 of the primary figures in this pantheon that most people never heard of is Michael Apple and Henry Giroux, especially Henry Giroux, who created what's called critical pedagogy. They're both self-avowed Marxists. This is not something that someone made up. This is what they say, and they're not abashed about it. And they have now you can't sell a Marxist education program in a school of education. You can't say, hey, well, come on here.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
do that.
Exactly.
So you're like a gangster who has to find a front man to launder the money, right?
You
You have
are
to find
so right. You are
yeah.
so right.
You have to find a front man to launder the dirty theory, Marxist theory. Let's find a guy. I got the guy. He's a Brazilian educator. He wrote a book, famous book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed in the 1970s. I'm sorry, 1970, and he was a Marxist. He this is unabashed. He was a Marxist. You can read anything. I mean, here's a book right here called Che Guevara, Paulo Freire, and the Revolution. This is the guy right here, Paulo Freire. He's a Brazilian educator, and it's the closest thing they have in education schools to a patron saint. He was a crypto Maoist. What I mean by that, because he admired Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. He said that Lenin and Stalin and even Fidel had the problem of how do you convince people to come aboard the new regime. And he said, Frere, well, those guys shot down the peasants, killed them.
Mm-hmm.
But he says Mao Zedong has come up with what he says, Frere, the most genial solution of the century, the Cultural Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people who have studied this understand that Mao Zedong killed about 2 million people during that period. Now, Mao killed a lot more people, okay? But as a result of the Cultural Revolution, we'll give him credit for 2 million of his own people. And this is what Paulo Freire greatly admired and called it the most genial solution of the century. He said this in 1974 when Mao's crimes were well known by this time. He said it in an article in Cross Currents, which he probably wished he had never written. And a lot of my colleagues don't want to pay attention to. They'd rather look at this guy right here, Paulo Freire, as this guy right here, not this Che up here, but Paulo Freire. He's got a gray beard. He smiles a lot, and he talks about the pedagogy of the oppressed. It's crypto-Maoism because he borrowed from Mao's education theory. That is what I mean when I say it's crypto-Maoist ideology. And in this brainwash I talk about, these folks want to bring students on a conveyor belt, their terminology, conveyor belt, a metaphor, from false consciousness over here to critical consciousness. Critical consciousness means that the scales have fallen from your eyes, Eden, and that you can now peer into society and see its contradictions, the relationships between power and privilege. And you are now privy to hidden knowledge. This is why students come off as so bombastic and self-righteous. They think that they have been ushered in or admitted into or anointed into this cabal of folks who are privileged with this hidden knowledge. And of course, their parents are stupid. They don't know about this.
Right, exactly.
It's the same old wine. It's the same old bitter Marxist wine that has been around for more than a century, with a new label, a new name, social justice education. This is what they're all about.
On this note, I want to get you back here, but then I have to take a break and go to my next guest. I would love to have you back. Brutal Minds, the Dark World of Left-Wing Brainwashing in Our Universities. I want to get a couple copies of your book and then give them out as gifts for our audience. I absolutely love what you have brought to the table here, and I applaud what you are doing. And I want to follow you. Where are you going to be on your speaking tour? Where can we get all of? I have the book going across the bottom, but where else can we find you? Where else can we support your work?
Well, the book is launching today on Amazon, and it's
congratulations.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. You can find it in Barnes and Noble on the new releases section and new and nonfiction. You can go to my website, brutalminds.com. Again, here's the book cover. Look, it's a kind of a banana yellow. It's People's Republic of China colors. And anywhere fine books are sold. But I would urge people to go to Amazon because that helps the conservative publisher and helps the conservative movement more than not going to Amazon hurts Amazon. Okay.
And also writing reviews helps you as well as you go up the numbers and keep that numbers going and getting the popularity for your book. So congratulations, sir. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your service. Go Army. I can't say beat Navy. I have Navy in my family too, but go Army.
Thanks, Eden.
So, thank you. I look forward to seeing you soon. Many blessings to you, sir.
Blessings to you.
Bye-bye. And for all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America. You guys, if you have not done so yet, go out and pick up Stanley's book. Go to Amazon, pick up the book. Brutal Minds. Oh, I tell you what, I'm going to go get a couple books, and then I'm going to go ahead and promote them here on the show, Common Sense America. And we're going to give out a couple of free books, because you guys, those who have high school students, those who have students who are already at university, if you are seeing a change in your kid, it could be the cult, it could be the brainwashing of what they are doing at these universities. So we have got for our kids to put on that full armor of God. You guys have done a phenomenal job in raising your kids, and we have got to continue to protect them as they go into the university system. We want the best for our next generation. This next generation has the potential to be the greatest next generation. But if we allow this woke cult mentality to take over their minds, their spirits, their hearts, and what they have in their journey, what is going to happen? So we, the people, we have a voice. We must stand up in the public square. We must fight back. There is no other choice but to fight back by faith. I have another phenomenal guest. She's a dear friend of mine. She's an educator in the great state of Rhode Island. And yeah, she's been put in teacher jail because of exactly what we just talked about. She's fighting. She's fighting the public school system in Rhode Island. She's been all over the news. I know you'll recognize this beautiful face. And last week, she was at an education forum live streaming for a Senate candidate, talking about what is happening, where she's at to this day. She's been fighting for the past couple of years. Her name is Ramona Bessinger. I am going to bring her right over to the show. Good morning. How are you, my friend?
I don't think I can hear nothing. Sorry.
You can't hear anything? Okay. All right. We will
I'm having a difficult time hearing.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Oh,
I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Sorry. I'm not sure what.
Nope, it's okay. Let's do this. Exit out and come back in. Exit out and come back in. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, I don't hear anything at all. I apologize, but.
Okay, for all those who are tuning in here at Common Sense America, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. And thank you to each and every one of you who are tuning in now and are watching this YouTube clip later today. I'm so grateful for your participation, your friendship to the show, your support to Common Sense America. It is all about God, country, and family. And I'm just grateful for those who tune in live and also who tune in after the show has been aired. It has been month of the military spouse, month of military appreciation. We've also been focusing a lot on the National Religious Broadcasters Convention and a lot of amazing guests who are going to be presenting their books, presenting their performances at the convention. So I've been grateful to be able to just present that to you as well. We have so many amazing things coming, and I just want to say to each and every one of you, I'm grateful. Thank you for supporting all of these new guests, all of the returning guests. And what you are doing is you're supporting faith. You are supporting this amazing country, the United States of America, and you're supporting your families. And so I'm grateful. I don't take a dime from doing this show, and I do it daily. And so I just want to thank you for that support. Any text message, any email, any posting on social media, thank you. Thank you for supporting this show. And with that, I'm going to bring over Ramona. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And
of course.
Earlier.
Of course, no, it's no problem. It happens. It happens all the time. You look fabulous.
Thank you.
And I am so proud of what you're doing. Can you give the audience an update on your journey? What is happening in Rhode Island? Where are you in all of this crazy culture wars that are attacking our educators?
Well, sure. I mean, I think what's happening in Rhode Island is happening nationwide and is of great concern. I think since we spoke last, a lot of things have sort of come to the surface. There seems to be a nationwide push to bring curriculum into the schools that is anti-American in its content and focused on this sort of sexualization or sex ed, this very bizarre. These are the two things that since we spoke last, I've really noticed an uptick in my own district as well.
Now, are you teaching currently, or are you still on hold? I mean, what are they doing with you? Because I love how you have stirred the pot, sister, and you do not stop the fight. And that's exactly what we need more of, is people fighting and not being afraid to speak up. So what is your status as an educator?
Well, I was, and this is public, so I can speak to this, I was placed on administrative leave, and that was October 8th, and here I sit. But I can speak to what is happening in my son's school, and as an educator, sort of observing the trends in education nationwide. I can't really speak about what is happening specifically to my position.
Sure, that's fine.
At school, but nationwide, certainly there's overlap. So.
Well, let me ask you this. I was watching your Fox News interview from the other day maybe it was the other day. I'm trying to remember now, but it was focusing on teacher appreciation. Yeah. And it really talked to our teachers still appreciated what are educators doing. And last week and yesterday, I re-aired an episode with a Loudoun County educator who was also a participant in that event, the Education Freedom event that Jonathan Emord hosted last week. And she was talking to being a young educator and what she is facing with the bathroom issues, what is happening with that whole scenario. So what are your thoughts on educators around the nation? Are they dropping off? Are they saying, no, I can't do this anymore? What's happening? What do you see happening?
Yeah, well, it seems to me that there is a trend. Teachers are fleeing the profession. Now, when I started teaching over 20 years ago, you couldn't even get an interview. Now they're desperate. They're taking people off the street. And, so one thing that has happened significantly, we've seen since 2020, is that the profession is being abandoned by excellent teachers. And there's a reason for that, because I think a lot of teachers are just overwhelmed with what they're seeing in the schools and disagree with it. And they see what's happening to teachers like me, who may be speaking out and voicing very reasonable concerns for students of all cultures, all cultures and religions and from all walks of life. Really, this is a universal issue. This is a human issue that is driving teachers out of the profession and enraging parents across the nation.
So let me take it to another step. So are you seeing a drop off of children now attending public schools and being removed from schools because of the parents' anger towards what is happening in the schools? Do you see parents pulling their kids out, homeschooling, private
Yes.
schools?
There's a significant drop in enrollment. Parents are rightly so taking their children out of fear, most likely, that their children are going to be indoctrinated into some bizarre cultish mindset, which seems to be dominating all schools currently. So there's definitely parental outrage, including myself. I've spoken out against some of the curriculum items that I'm seeing as a parent in my son's school that are actually shocking and horrifying. If my son were younger, I would definitely remove him out of the school, take him out of school. But he's going into his senior year, so
right,
we're going to tough it out.
The curriculum that you were exposed to, and I use that term very loosely, that you were exposed to, that you were told to expose your children, your pupils to, is it similar to what I just had Stanley Ridgely on, who is a professor, PhD at Drexel, and he talked about the student affairs that is now popping up at all these universities. And he said there's a curriculum and then there's a co-curriculum. So were you exposed to a co-curriculum that came along with your curriculum? And is that what flagged you to this woke indoctrination, the CRT, all of this stuff coming in? What was that turning point for you? Or was it just embedded and you gradually saw it? How did you?
No, it wasn't gradual at all. And I spoke to this in my article in Legal Insurrection in 2021, I believe it was. I wrote about this specifically, that basically our books were removed from the classroom and replaced with entire platforms, educational platforms, and included in those platforms are assessments and books and lesson plans, very scripted lesson plans, I might add. So what we saw coming in was a complete sort of hijacking of curriculum materials. And I'll give you a quick example.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So normally at the middle school, I was at the middle school at the time, and we teach units of on genocide and Anne Frank in particular. Well, we were told not to teach the Holocaust or Anne Frank because we were to teach this other westward expansion that had to, sort of reframed the American historical narrative to include this oppressor versus oppressed narrative. And immediately, we could see as educators, there was something very wrong with this. And then when you get to the high school, a lot of the classics are taught. And I think the professor was speaking about earlier, you have the classics there on the shelf, on the online shelves, and actually in the classrooms. But again, the lesson plans reflect some political ideologies. And just a real quick example, Shakespeare is taught through, or Romeo and Juliet is taught through this sort of gender identity lens. Could Romeo have been struggling with his sexuality? Could Juliet be struggling as a young woman seeking out her autonomy as, whatever? I mean, just absolutely ridiculous interpretations of the classics. So really American literature and American K through 12 education has been 100% hijacked with political ideologies.
Yes. So I want to talk about the trans aspect. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Sorry.
I want to talk to you about the trans commentary, the content that's happening in the schools. And, the educator that was on last week, and I re-aired it yesterday, talked about the day that she signed to be an educator in Loudoun County was the day that the boy who said he was a girl dressed up, put a skirt on, went into the girl's bathroom and raped that little girl. So let's talk about the trans piece. You have a son that's in high school. What are you seeing in your part of the country? And what are you seeing nationwide from this agenda that is, I call it pure evil. I really do.
Well, what's evil about it is that, again, just as the American history has been hijacked and the entire curriculum and school culture has been hijacked with these sort of anti-American, anti-girl, anti-boy ideologies, we're also seeing this bizarre, sort of, I guess, gender ideology enter the schools. And the fact of the matter is that there are going to be children that will struggle with gender dysphoria. There's going to be children who are gay, who are, whatever, struggle with various identities, may struggle with their religious beliefs. Those things really need to be dealt with by family members and with family members, and should in no way be sort of taken up by school officials. There's a danger there. And the danger is this: if you have a child who struggles with any kind of an identity crisis or issue, which is, by the way, their job to do in high school and middle school, then they're going to seek out the attention of anyone who will support their perceived identity crisis. And if that means separating them out from the parents, that is indeed what is happening. So, so we're seeing, kids normally going through various stages of identity crisis, being sort of captured by this, gender ideology and what you're seeing as sort of trans movement in the school.
Right. Are you still there? I didn't see.
Yeah, I am there. I don't know why this is happening. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Really
We only have about 3 minutes left until the end of the show. So let me just ask you this on a final question, final note. What would you recommend to those who are graduating from university who wanted to become a teacher and are now seeing all of these things happening in and around the schools, public schools? What would you say to them? For all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America. We are with Ramona Bessinger. She's an educator in the great state of Rhode Island. She is speaking out against the woke education. She has been on, I call it teacher jail, but she is since October, I believe, of last year. So, and she is the whistleblower in public education for Rhode Island, from Rhode Island. There she is. You okay? Okay, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. Sorry. There you go. That's okay. It's okay. One final question for you.
Yeah.
For those who are graduating from university who wanted to become teachers, what do you say to them as they head into this battlefield?
Well, honestly, a lot of the schools currently are teaching this woke ideology to young teachers. And I think we're seeing also a lot of teachers leaving those programs because they don't agree with them. That's why there's a teacher shortage. But I would say this to any teacher starting out in the profession: you need to hold true to the truth and do not buy into the bullying and intimidation, because it matters for not only the nation, but for, their who's your own children, your own families, and to really stand strong. That is that would be my message.
So for all of those who are tuning in, where can you tell my audience to follow you? I have your Twitter account going across, and it looks like that's what you're there daily, pretty much posting things. You've been all over the news, national news. What do you have coming down the pike as we head into the summer? And what's ahead for you that you can speak to?
Well, I'm going to continue to sound the alarm nationally on exactly what is happening. So currently I'm trying to speak to some of the things that the NEA and the Department of Education are pressing and sharing out on social media. They're sharing things that are not entirely true. They're sort of gaslighting parents. And so I feel it's, I'm going to continue to sort of fight on that level, on the national level, but also locally. I work closely with a parent group here in Rhode Island to sort of combat this. It's 24 hours a day, 7 day a week job.
Yeah, I know it is. I know it is. I know what you have done, and you are a warrior. You are a warrior. So to all of those educators out there, to those who are fighting back the system, I am so proud of you. I applaud you. And no, we aren't the domestic terrorists. We aren't the extremists. We are the ones that believe in this nation. We believe in our God. We believe in our families, and we believe in this country. And we believe in those values that this country was founded on. And you are one of those powerful voices. So I want to continue to encourage you. And for all of those who are tuning in here, Common Sense America, please follow Ramona on her Twitter account, Ramona Bessinger. Please go follow her, support her, follow her work, her interviews, and everything that she is doing. So for such a time as this, be strong, be courageous, and we will be back tomorrow with more new guests. Thank you so much for joining Common Sense America. Have a great day.
Time for Common Sense America.